The greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members. Struggle is a never-ending process. Freedom is never really won, you earn it and win it in every generation. Revenge and retaliation always perpetuate the cycle of anger, fear, and violence. Freedom and justice cannot be parceled out in pieces to suit political convenience. I don't believe you can stand for freedom for one group of people and deny it to others. My story is a freedom song of struggle. It is about finding one's purpose, how to overcome fear, and to stand up for causes bigger than oneself. When fear rushed in, I learned how to hear my heart racing, but refused to allow my feelings to sway me. That resilience came from my family. It flowed through our bloodline. To abandon affirmative action is to say there is nothing more to be done about discrimination. Sometimes, I am also identified as a civil rights leader or a human rights activist. I would also like to be thought of as a complex, three-dimensional, flesh-and-blood human being with a rich storehouse of experiences, much like everyone else, yet unique in my own way, much like everyone else. Just be what you are. And I try to be my best self and be what I am, and knowing what I am and be satisfied with that. And if people don't know it, maybe they'll eventually know it. My story is a freedom song from within my soul. It is a guide to discovery, a vision of how even the worst pain and heartaches can be channeled into human monuments, impenetrable and everlasting. I believe all Americans who believe in freedom, tolerance, and human rights have a responsibility to oppose bigotry and prejudice based on sexual orientation. As one whose husband and mother-in-law have died the victims of murder and assassination, I stand firmly and unequivocally opposed to the death penalty for those convicted of capital offenses. An evil deed is not redeemed by an evil deed of retaliation. If American women would increase their voting turnout by 10%, I think we would see an end to all of the budget cuts and programs benefiting women and children. Our Congress passes laws which subsidize corporation farms, oil companies, airlines, and houses for suburbia. But when they turn their attention to the poor, they suddenly become concerned about balancing the budget and cut back on the funds for Head Start, Medicare, and mental health appropriations. It is plain that we don't care about our poor people except to exploit them as cheap labor and victimize them through excessive rents and consumer prices. There is no reason why a nation as rich as ours should be blighted by poverty, disease, and illiteracy. During the bus boycott, I was tested by fire, and I came to understand that I was not a breakable crystal figurine. You cannot have peaceful means will have to be used to bring about peaceful ends. If you use destructive means, you're going to bring about destructive ends. Mr. Sessions' conduct as a U.S. attorney, from his politically motivated voting fraud prosecutions to his indifference toward criminal violations of civil rights laws, indicated that he lacks the temperament, fairness, and judgment to be a federal judge. The Voting Rights Act was, and still is, vitally important to the future of democracy in the United States. Hate is too great a burden to bear. It injures the hater more than it injures the hated. Women, if the soul of the nation is to be saved, I believe that you must become its soul. The woman power of this nation can be the power which makes us whole and heals the rotten community, now so shattered by war and poverty and racism. I have great faith in the power of women who will dedicate themselves wholeheartedly to the task of remaking our society. The failure to invest in youth reflects a lack of compassion and a colossal failure of common sense. Mama and Daddy King represent the best in manhood and womanhood, the best in a marriage, the kind of people we are trying to become. Nonviolence is the only credible response to the violence we're seeing around the world. Segregation was wrong when it was forced by white people, and I believe it is still wrong when it is requested by black people. In the area of economic justice, we still have a long way to go. We have too many people who are discriminated against just because they happen to be black or they happen to be a woman or some other minority. Before I was married to Martin and became a king, I was a proud Scot, shaped by my mother's discernment and my father's strength. Homophobia is like racism and anti-Semitism and other forms of bigotry in that it seeks to dehumanize a large group of people, to deny their humanity, their dignity, and personhood. I'm fulfilled in what I do. I never thought that a lot of money or fine clothes, the finer things of life, would make you happy. My concept of happiness is to be filled in a spiritual sense. I think if people really read Martin Luther King, Jr., then they would begin to understand what he really represented. I can't help but believe that at some time in the not-too-distant future, there is going to be another movement to change these systemic conditions of poverty, injustice, and violence in people's lives. That is where we've got to go, and it is going to be a struggle. What most did not understand then was that I was not only married to the man I loved, but I was also married to the movement that I loved. Wherever there was injustice, war, discrimination against women, gays, and the disadvantaged, I did my best to show up and exert moral persuasion. While not a panacea for the nation's illegal immigration problems, employer sanctions are one necessary means of stopping the exploitation of vulnerable workers and the undercutting of American jobs and living standards. We can prevent many people from becoming terrorists by truly listening to people who feel they've been treated unjustly and responding to their concerns with a sense of justice and compassion. I always knew that I was called to do something. I didn't know what, but I finally rationalized after I met Martin, and it took a lot of praying to discover this, that this was probably what God had called me to do, to marry him. I suppose I experienced the personal dilemma that baffles every working woman. What happens when you are expected to be Superwoman, to perform a dozen conflicting tasks at the same time?